I thought there were more people than that up there.
Without video.
Okay, there's another number. We rally maybe.
Hey guys, how you doing?
How are you?
Hi, Tom.
Hey, Tom.
All right, we have a quorum, so I'll open the meeting. First order of business is public comment. Mr. Nicanello.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I have to thank everybody for their volunteerism. You know, this time of year it's Christmas, and we all want to be in a few other things with our family. So, thank you very much for donating your time to this very important topic. Our historic town goes forward with more historic agendas. I just have a little thing I'd just like to read for a minute. It says it's about water, and so I would hear, whether it's waste or drinking or non-potable. This is a little piece from Austin, Texas, which they've been reclaimed water.
Can you hear him? Those on Zoom?
Yes.
It's garbled.
No, very. Yeah, I'm good on my end.
What? Just come up a little closer and speak. Okay, one way or the other.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going on the record.
So it says, I'll be very quick because time is here. Conserving water has benefits beyond lowering our bill. Unless water requires less electricity and human services, reduces need for expensive system expansion, and helps ensure the availability of clean water for generations to come. In 2019, Austin achieved the slowest water use ever at 120 gallons per person per day. As their population continues to grow, Austin Water remains committed to offering effective tools, programs, and rebates to help customers conserve one of our most precious resources, water. So what that calculation means, that means our town, which does about 3.78 million gallons of water per day at 24,000 residents, we're giving our residents 154 gallons per day to be used. More so than Austin, Texas, and we're less population. Thank you.
Carol, is everybody on Zoom easy to see here? There's no public, right? Nobody else?
You want me to? I just hid the people who don't have the videos on. There are. I'll leave that on so you can see if anybody raises their hand.
Anybody else in the public want to comment? I guess not. Okay. So we're going on to the OPM RFQ and designer RFQ process that you built. That's true.
Yeah, I can comment on that. We haven't met since town meeting approved the funds for OPM and wastewater treatment facility design services. But
congratulations! Everybody knows that, right? That we were successful at the town meeting getting the funding to do the design for the plant. So major item.
Yes, and I think it was well received at town meeting as well. So that was great. Good. So we want to hit the ground running, and we have drafted a OPM RFQ, and that is actually out on the street as we speak. It's on the town website if anyone wants to download it and take a look at that detail. It has the same kind of template that we've used in the past for other OPM services, and that's the first step in the process, is to get that party, that firm on board to provide those services for us. And then we will do a similar, and we're working on it in-house right now, design RFQ for the wastewater treatment facility as well. But we need to get the OPM on board first, award that, and then move forward with the designer. But we're looking to do it in a quick fashion. Not only do we get the OPM RFQ out quickly, but we'll look to do this with the designer services for the treatment facility, and in a little bit of an overlapping fashion so that we can move it forward quickly. We certainly won't look to do any kind of award until we have an OPM on board that can help kind of guide us through that award process with the designer. But in other more traditional processes, it would be a little slower process, but we know that we have some time constraints that we're dealing with. We're looking to get into what we hope to be the next SRF cycle in 2022. And so there's a lot of work to do between now and then. And so because of that, we're looking to expedite this administrative piece of the project as quickly as possible. So that's an overview of where we stand on the designer RFQ. Hopefully that'll be early January. We'll be able to release that as well. And hopefully make a quick decision on the OPM so that we can move forward with the designer. So that's a rough timetable on those two components. One, to keep the committee up to date on what that looks like. The last piece, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you have about that, but the last piece of that update that I wanted to bring forward is the Board of Selectmen was very interested in having somebody from RAC as part of that evaluation team. So I don't know if we have any volunteers or someone that would want to participate with town staff in reviewing the OPM proposals that come in. Currently, the deadline for the OPM proposals is the 27th of December. We actually did extend that slightly from the initial December 17th date, I believe, to give firms a little more time to react and put their proposals together. But because we want to move quickly, we feel we really need to hold with that date so we can get those proposals out to the evaluation team and we can review those and have some interviews and move forward in a quick fashion. So I'm happy to answer any questions and also entertain any volunteers that might be interested in that process.
Just a quick question. How far, this is all to the wastewater treatment plant. How far?
Well, the OPM service is for overall plant. So
including the trunk line.
This does not have that was authorized by town meeting for OPM services until this past fall town meeting. Everything we've done so far has been more on a high level planning level. With the owner's project manager, it's going to be very important to help us manage not only the schedule, which is critical, but also when we get down to implementation, we can talk about exactly what that looks like. But I think a good model to have is that with the OPM would also be the inspectors or the resident engineers on the project. That is what we did with the DPW building project. The inspector was actually part of that OPM contract. And so as going forward, that's a model that I think is worth taking a look at. So we want to get the OPM on board early. That's a state requirement. And so that's what we're doing. So, but the OPM would be the overall wastewater program, collection and treatment.
What process does this go through once it's been looked at and considered? Is it coming back to the RAC before it goes to selectmen? Does it stay with staff and then go to the selectmen? Does it even go to the selectmen? I mean, what road is this these services going to take?
Yeah, great question. Our goal is to keep everyone well informed and move forward quickly. Currently, the town administrator has the authority to authorize all contracts, including these contracts here as well. And so while we plan to do regular updates with the Board of Selectmen and the RAC, the plan would be for the evaluation committee, which hopefully there'll be a RAC member on that, to make a recommendation to Bob, and then Bob would award that contract. So it's not like some communities where contracts have to go to the Board of Selectmen for authorization. That's not the case in there, but the town administrator does.
Jeff, the liaison from RAC would come back to RAC and discuss most likely the candidates and things like that, essentially.
Or I can do that.
Yeah, okay.
I'm at all your meetings.
Yeah.
Just to maybe mention the way we work a procurement process, and this is the procurement, of the OPM, is we establish, and this is under the RFP, we've already notified everybody, so we have to continue to follow it. We establish the evaluation committee, and that committee, it's not independent evaluations at different spots. What we seek to do is consolidate the town's evaluation of the candidates so that we're accountable to this. One single, there's a written evaluation that's based on the feedback from the committee members. So that's why it's very important to us to have RAC membership on that evaluation committee. So it's a consensus of one evaluation process that ranks the candidates A, B, C.
Do you think one person from RAC is enough? Should
Two
it
is
be more
fine.
participation? Or
I think you know, my thought process was 1 to 2. You don't want to have a big committee,
right, you don't want to bog it down with too many people.
but certainly 2 people from RAC would, I think, be fine.
Okay. Is there anybody not taking a step backwards?
One of the practices that's worked well in this town and others is that there's a committee appointed, member appointed, and an alternate. So if there's a scheduling conflict or a meeting time conflict, it's much easier to have somebody representing or having been on this board step in at that point. So if you're not going to find 2 full-time volunteers, maybe 1.5, might work well.
So my thinking is, I don't imagine it's going to be a very short-term project as far as picking the OPM.
Very
It's
short.
going to be happening, what, within a month or 2 at the most?
Well, at the most. So with the deadline being the 27th of December, we'll distribute those proposals out to whoever the evaluation team consists of. Look at those for about a week, and then we'll decide which firms or entities we'd like to bring in for interviews, but I'll do it in a relatively short, few week period, really. We want to get the OPM on board, as I mentioned before we go too deep into the designer selection process, and we can't even begin the design process on the treatment plan until we have that party on board. So we really need to move quickly here.
I will do it, lacking anybody else. If any other 2 people would like to do it, I'd be glad to let them do it. So what? The 1.5 people, whatever. Mary, you're muted.
Sorry, I said I'd be glad to back you up if you need it.
Okay. I guess that takes care of that. So do you see putting the designer RFQ out before you're done with the OPM, or just as soon as you get it done, try to put that on the street?
Well, at this point, we're hoping to get that out before we're done with the OPM process. That's kind of what I was referring to before. It may be a more methodical process. We would do the OPM, have them on board. They even help us develop the RFQ for designer selection. But we do have some good templates for designer selection that I feel comfortable at least moving that forward, so we can maybe shorten the process up a little bit. But we would certainly have the OPM on board, let them weigh in on the design selection process before we move that forward. But it's a relatively tight time frame. We're on a similar time frame a year ago when we were selecting OPM and designer for the police station HVAC system project. And we were selecting an OPM about this time and doing the designer in March. I'm really trying to shorten that up so we're not, wasting all these months before we get a designer on board, because then we have to, come to a level of design that we're able to enter into the SRF process at the end of next year or August of next year. And so there's just a lot to do.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I know Bob's goal is to do SRF by next August. So
right.
Obviously, there's a lot that we have to get done.
It's a huge
in a very short period of time. So okay, we'll move forward with that, I guess. And I think we're going to need, well, actually, it's a few further down. Okay, web pages update.
Kyle, can you send me up, please? Thank you. I'm Bill Scott, the Assistant Town Administrator, and provided a presentation, myself and Jeff, to the Selectmen on November 30th. What we're looking at here is, as we move from DHY to Y in terms of a project, is sort of creating an approach that is locally based. So I can do the rest of the shtick. Thanks. So this presentation goes over what we went over with the Board of Selectmen. So the key issue is when under DHY, there was a lot more coordination outside of the Yarmouth government. There's a requirement sort of as you develop products that they have sort of a regional application. There's a coordination that's necessary with staff, and it has to move up through that system, DHY. A lot of this is not necessary anymore, as Yarmouth now has the option for its own project management structure and to determine the message, the deliverables, the schedule, and everything else. So distinct in that is to almost restructure, not necessarily, well, yes, necessarily the branding, the web pages and everything else, whereas there were several web pages related to the regional effort. There'll be one set of web pages related to the Yarmouth effort. So we have the ability to more confidently pursue outside funding also and deliver the message through our own means. The key issue, and I think that Bob has reinforced this, Bob Rittenauer, administrator, is we're in implementation mode, that we want to clearly articulate to everybody that this is an implementation project and not more studies per se. But we do need to do some work and some analysis and development of items. And we want to look at it to Jeff's credit, and more than sewer. We have done some great work in terms of stormwater, fertilizer, and culvert widening and things like that, that have helped the nitrate issue. So I'll provide this presentation to everybody. So, if you don't want to have to take notes. So we want to look at this as more of a sewer issue and as much an environmental issue, and look at all the things that we've been doing. We want to create an information system that aligns issues by topics so that people can go to some of the environmental or the economic topics and understand the relationship between each of them. Provide a venue for each member of the team. We have an outstanding team here between the various departments that, by virtue of the way we want to organize this, we can get them directly involved to create deliverables. So this is sort of structure of each of these would represent pages that are in topical areas that look at it as an environmental project and a sewer project. So we look at economic and land use. By virtue of a sewer project down 28 in phase 1, we are going to have economic and land use pressures associated with the project. So we probably want to get ahead of that and look at some of the advantages or opportunities and constraints, and look at regulations as they relate to our requirements under certain funding sources. Environmental and health, we might be posting issues here on nitrate loading in the embayment areas and the health impacts, so that if people are, doubting the consistent pattern of sort of nitrate impacts, we would have that data available for them on that page. Household and business, as we get closer to the implementation, we want to be able to explain to people how they connect, what where they might get funding for the connection, what the betterment fees are and things like that. But that's an iterative process as we develop the information. Regulatory impacts, state and federal. This is as much, why are we taking certain steps, and it's within the regulations. So why are we structuring the program in a certain manner? So SRF loans have certain regulatory requirements, and there are other regulatory requirements in MIPA and things like that. In financing and operations, obviously, how are we going to finance this? And when we do get to operations, how we finance that. In engineering project management, that's pretty much just the facts. That's really Jeff's team putting the plans out there, the schedules and other things, the OPM information as we move forward. So what this does is you can attribute each one of those boxes somewhat to a department or a jurisdiction, and therefore each of those departments and jurisdictions contribute deliverables to those web pages as we move forward. So as we develop economic strategies and land use strategies, we would populate that web page with those as they relate to sewer. And they may not directly relate to sewer, but by virtue of sewer, there's going to be a sort of shift in growth in the corridor. Now, the wastewater committee is still an active part. It would not be as specific as some of these pages down the bottom in terms of, if we look at this as an implementation strategy, we're writing ordinances, we're doing analysis that gets us to a goal that's all required, excuse me, based on the regulations and the programs were meant to respond to. So there's a main page, which is a table of contents. FAQs, somebody might see a frequently asked question that says, where can I find out information on nitrates? And that would link them to the environmental page. So I think it's obviously between DHY and Y, there's a paradigm shift. And we like to make sure that what you have on your page is great information. What else do you want in your page within the context of that sort of paradigm shift? Obviously, we need to take down some of the things that are more DHY and put up some of the things that are more sort of Y.
Man,
so
huge game. They're never easy in the NFL, so it's great to get a 10-3.
Where are we?
I love the NFL.
Somebody needs to mute
yes,
themselves.
Stay unmuted.
I think they're okay for now.
So right now, those are the web pages, and that little yellow space represents a web page that this would belong on. This is what we refer to as a foundation information. Everything schedules around this. So what Jeff's team, the OPM, come up with in terms of a sequence that meets the permitting, that meets the SRF requirements, that meet town meeting requirements, everything else is inserted within this, but we need sewer regulations and other things. So the primary schedule is the one that gets the facility built. And these are some of the components to that. So moving forward, there's base information that to meet some of these regulations, there's a great flow build-out study that's already done. But if we're going to look at grants for economic development that build infrastructure to facilitate economic development, then there's other build-out studies and other analysis in terms of job creation. Traffic would be for like a MassWorks grant for traffic improvements and things like that. And also we want to take a look at, what is the impact if nothing is done? So an analysis of septic system, lot size and things like that to tell us where that some of the constraints might be in septic. So these are some of the base information. First thing is really a table of all the regulations, conditions, and criteria by jurisdiction to tell us what do we have to conform to, and then a literature search. So the key to this is we're going to try to find everything to put in these boxes where it is relevant. So in my literature search, I found a EIR done by the EPA in 1980 that had the project phase 1 at $9 million. So, and it was most of phase 1, but it's an example of, and it was pretty close to the scope that we're doing right now. And it's an example of all the information we need to collect because, I've only been here for 4 months, so most of my knowledge is being developed by, discussions, anecdote, and things like that. Putting it all here means that all the people that want to support us have the information available to them. So economic and land use, market studies and strategies for the corridor, land use approaches, proposed regulations, and then a capital plan. The work that's being done with DOT is exemplary in terms of the leverage we're getting out of DOT and the potential for improvements in the corridor. We want to be able to extend that effort and, possibly improve what DOT is doing. And so as the sewer is going in, we also know what we want to do with sidewalks and all the other things. So this type of thing sort of helps developers understand what's going to be at your front door eventually. And the economic market strategy and study is all in the land uses in the corridor. Are there other opportunities that provide a good, strong, balanced economy that the sewer could attract? And Kyle is constantly telling me that broadband is another issue. I think that's something that we need to look at to make sure that the infrastructure is here. And the question is, how many people aren't locating here because there isn't sewer? And are they of a land use that provides the mix that we want, the taxation, the job creation? And that's what economic and land use would look at. Finance and operations, it may seem early, but you want to know your sewer department structure, budget, financial plan, assets to run the plant. And the important thing there is you certainly don't want to be assigning the new sewer revenues to the sewer department or to capital debt if it needs to go to the sewer department. So knowing that now means that you know what you're going to have for costs, so you can build a strong financial plan and set aside your projected revenues to run the department in some of the out years. Betterment model regulations, those are some things we should be looking at. Revenue projections and process, other sources and schedule. When I talked about that foundation sort of projects, the ones that represent the actual implementation, if you time it right, you can time in grants into those schedules. But you need to understand that phase 1 is moving along and a MassWorks grant happens. The round opens in June, it closes in November. How does that relate to the SRF funding? So you're actually creating a schedule that layers all that. So that's part of the financing approach. And a financial plan update with a Y approach. We've already got some data in that. Adding these other things in terms of additional revenue sources, where do we end up being? And again, it touches several boxes in there. There are a betterment model and regulations that might have some policy decisions that we would want to come to the RAC and say, here are several opportunities for this. What do you think is the most palatable? What are the issues you see with these approaches? So finance other sources, these are some of the things that are out there, SRF, clean water, DIF plan and program. And again, that original build out information, you need those kind of information to determine what your revenues might be for DIF, which is district improvement financing. So TIF planning guidelines, you might find that there are land uses out there that you really want that a TIF might help you get. EDA grant on design. There's some EDA money out there for design. MassWorks, it's a grant that happens every year, and it's extremely good for infrastructure as it relates to economic development. And everybody's heard about the Build Back Better from Biden. So, we need to look at that. So we need to take a look at the criteria on that, and then it affects some of those boxes that are there, but incorporating this within the context of the foundation schedule and meeting the criteria and doing the studies that are necessary, it's important that we move the sewer project forward. But as we're doing that, doing an economic and land use analysis might leverage some of this money, which allows the sewer project to move forward. So it's almost cyclical in that regard. Environmental health. A lot of people, have talked about, the MEP studies and other things. I think what we want to do is create data that shows in its simple form. Here's the chart combining some of this data to show you in basic outline that the degradation continues in the projections. Data on septic failures over time, percent of the population to be required to replace the system. That comes from maybe some of the septic data that's out there. So as we're getting people asking us, well, why should I do this? We want to be able to understand what septic systems are out there, what their condition are, and understand, that hopefully, that the majority of them eventually are going to be something that they're more of an advantage being in the sewer system. And obviously the health impacts. What are the health impacts of nitrates? How does it relate to water supply and other things? So this page really goes over that at a minimum, but it's a place that when people are asking questions before they go to that meeting, before they go to town meeting, before they go to public meeting, they have a venue that they can look up this information. And there's a lot of it. Just getting it into that one environmental health page, I think, is an advantage. Household and business, I usually phrase this page as, how can we get you into a sewer system today, like a used car salesman or something. In this case, why connect? The process to connect, the cost to connect, financing methods to connect. somebody told me that before the sewer system was moved forward in one town, 18 months in advance, they were getting a letter with all this information in it. So as we develop this information, we want to be able to have a venue to post it so that they're not going through the environmental, health, economic, that they're going right to this page and they're getting detailed information on phasing and other things that we can answer, betterments. So self-serve in that regard. So in its simplest form, you know, this is really, you know, where you're inserting some of this information. You know, the things that Jeff is going to work on with the OPM and the construction funding, you know, we're going to look at alternate funding sources to make sure that we don't sort of miss out on opportunities. When we go for the construction funding, will they require us to have drafts and regulations, ordinances, and understanding of other financing, land use and economic? This is where we want to insert that before we go to construction funding. So if August 2022 is there and we need to have draft ordinances, then we need to have them before we apply. Economic development coordination, you know, you're doing some of that before construction funding, obviously, and early. But usually you're not doing the coordination with a developer until the construction's been funded, because otherwise it's moot to move ahead with the development if it's dependent on the sewer. So you're sort of finishing up your coordination there. And business and household connection coordination. Again, after you get to construction funding, you're really nailing down all the details and telling people that we're moving forward into construction. So that's a really simple description on how that works. There's a far more complex project management chart where all those things are inserted. So we're going to be looking at an overall schedule for all the project components, starting with those foundation milestones, sequencing them to town meetings, sequencing the documents that support everything, sequence to build project support. And I think, and that's where we're sort of incorporating where should we have public meetings with the RAC, providing that leadership role as we hit some of these milestones. And within the context of all of this, you know, if implementation is the goal, the sequence goes all the way to ribbon cutting. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what the caterer is going to bring, but, you know, we want to know when we're going to be done with this so we can move on to operational. So nothing is linear. This is really a critical path where each of these different deliverables has its own path, but they need to occur within the context of the other things. So they overlap. They might change. Grants come in, grants maybe aren't available. So this is an iterative process, except for the foundation components, so that as we develop sort of the schedule for those basic components, everything else fits into that schedule. And I think, oh yeah, that's the study, the 1980 document, and there's the amount. So if we're starting there, I'm sure that we have quite a few documents for the website. But part of that whole process is, and this is, these two sort of agenda items kind of blend together. As you start populating each of those boxes with documents, you're creating teams within each box and then across the boxes. So inherently that bottom set are the staff teams coming together to coordinate their work and coordinate their information. But with this method, if somebody gets a question on, I heard that there's going to be economic growth because of this, let me send you the link to the economic page. I heard that there's a consistent rise in nitrates and it affects water supply. Let me send you to the environmental and health page. So this is a very good way of, you know, you would say that it's not really working in silos, but what it is for the general public, they'll be able to find the information. And I know there's a lot of it. We just need to put it in a format that they can get to. That's pretty much it. It sort of goes over 3 and 4. And most of it is about the sort of staff organizational team structure and then the web pages. But you can see if you had DHY, it would be very difficult to build an individual page that goes in a certain direction. But with Y, you can build this because it's all about the Yarmouth program. So any questions
or comment?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no, I just want to say Bill and I have been, talking about this in quite a lot of detail, and with some of the staff team and Jeff and everyone. And I just want to say I think Bill's done a really great job. A couple of key items that we need to get accomplished here that I think this helps us do is, number one, what I think it's a great way to get town departments and our broader staff more intimately familiar with and involved in this project so that we're all working together. It's easily, the biggest thing that we're going to be doing, and everyone's got a role. It's not just for, the RAC committee. This is really transcending a lot of our operations, and it's awesome, some of the meetings I've been to see some additional staff support and discussion about elements of the project that are going to be critical to do this. And number two, I really think that, if we can continue to get everyone involved and to coordinate it, it's going to help ramp up the flow of information that we need to get this project moving forward. And, we really have to be more comprehensive in pulling everything together, or else, it's just going to foster greater delays. So, Bill's help in having, this conceptualized this way and presented, I think is really going to be a big benefit. And, the Water Resources Advisory Committee is kind of a key person that will have general, oversight on our page of the, some of the critical community issues, but you'll be backed up by technical information and all of these other things. So, it'll wind up being, I think, a much more thorough approach. And so I was happy to see that.
And I think to Bob's point about being backed up, I think that there's a lot of people that want to support this, but they need some place where they can point to. Go to the environmental page, you'll see how bad it is. Go to the economic page, you'll see how good it could be. And what we're doing here is basically giving them the information to then, spread the word on the advantages, the opportunities of the program, and the constraints of not doing anything. And so financing operations, having the financing plan and the operational plan online means that questions are going to be answered. And crucial to that is a hustle to business one. As you get closer to implementation, having some place where people can maybe click on their property and say, okay, here's what we know about your connection cost, when you're scheduled, who to contact, to apply for low interest loans and things like that. It's as much something that's going to happen over time, but we will have the boxes set up to receive everything as the deliverables move forward.
Anybody else have any comments? Mr. Durkin?
Yeah, I'm very pleased to see such a outstanding coordination of all of the aspects, and there are so many of them. As far as wastewater implementation is concerned, I know Bill has not made a prioritization of these elements. He doesn't intend to, I'm sure. No. But when you look at it as a person in community of Yarmouth, they are going to prioritize these. And I ask ourselves the questions, why are we doing this? To create our economic status, or to protect the health and well-being of the community? What's most important here? Economics doesn't mean anything if you are not healthy enough as a community to accomplish any of these things. So rather than have this misinterpreted as a prioritization by the community, I think it would be appropriate to have personal and environmental health be the prime mover of this entire project. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I've been saying that for a long time, that, we have to keep repeating that we do this for environmental reasons. It's economic benefits that can help pay for it. So it's a nice, to me, that's a short and sweet message, and that's about as simple as you know.
Say it again, though.
We do this for environmental reasons.
We do it for helpful environmental reasons.
Whatever you want to call it.
I do.
But it's the economic benefits that are going to help pay for it.
You can't do anything without the money. That's true. But why are you undertaking this? Is important.
Oh no, and that's my point.
Yeah.
When people say it's just for the businesses, it's not. That's how we get to pay for this environmental improvement.
Absolutely.
Good point. You should be clear about that.
A couple things. Where does the management of these web pages lie? And after that, does it have to be web pages inside of the town's website,
as opposed to
having its own URL?
Well, I mean, we can, organizationally, its own URL and everything else, and we can look at that. These would belong to each team. We're talking about a really simple web page design, which is 3 paragraphs, and then all we're going to do is list the attachments. So there's not going to be a lot of, creativity that's required to keep them updated. The 3 paragraphs are what is on this page, why is this important to the project, and what are we trying to accomplish moving forward under this topic. And then you list the reports and maybe a table of contents. So each team, economic and land use, would be, some of the staff members would say, we just finished this land use, or we have a draft zoning ordinance, or we have this. Let's post it here, or let's post a link to the planning board site, so that a person wouldn't have to go to the different departments to find this if they're looking at this. I can't speak to this separate URL. What I would want to see out of this is a different graphic theme website than our own webpage.
It doesn't necessarily have to sit outside in its own URL, although would be interested in finding out if we could grab a URL and point it to these pages, because even what I had to do this afternoon before I came to the meeting here, I know this is on the agenda. I got to go read the web pages to refresh my memory what's in there, so we can have this discussion. And I'm constantly going through the gateways,
right,
to get there.
Everyone's always telling us they can't find stuff. That's a good point.
Yarmouth Wastewater.org shoots you right to these web pages as a directional, as opposed to parking it outside.
Or it's the sewer.org.
It's the sewer, dummy.
Flushing Yarmouth.
Flushing Yarmouth.
Well, my understanding is the website's supposed to get a complete redo anyway. So, right?
Not take that on at the moment.
Not for us. I'm not talking about our end. Just in general, the towns. Because
at some point tonight,
I'm one of those people with you. I'm just like, why is it so many steps to get to where I want to go? It shouldn't be.
Yeah, and you're right. It's mixed in with town business, and as a result, there are layers.
Up to this point, having it at the top of the navigational bar,
right,
just,
right.
Being able to pop in and out if you need to, but as opposed to something that you're going to remember for the next 40 years to get in and out of this stuff. It might have its own domain. And with that, there seems to be, once we leave this meeting, some confusion generally as to the appropriate designated role for this committee, right? So I always harken back to the A in RAC. We're an advisory committee of the selectmen. We don't technically decide anything other than what our recommendation is to the selectmen. Sometimes it gets lost on folks outside of the immediate conversation. We would put forward a recommendation, the selectmen accepted it, and then the project and then the decision moves forward. Is there any consideration to do more than advise? Should we be involved?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that.
Statutory authority.
What this does is these are more of the technical documents and the deliverables. So it doesn't. The bottom pages are not about policy. So if there are policy decisions, it happens at wastewater committee within the context of the way we've been doing things. Policy isn't usually down the bottom. So if we have finance, household and business, and we have a betterment system, we would be presenting a betterment system that it follows a law that we might have reviewed with the wastewater committee and the selectmen. So, I mean, and just to point to in terms of the hierarchy, I know it's structured like that. The pages will be independent. So if we want to make environmental and health that, then I think the priority, then we can mention that throughout all the other pages that, you know, the key to economic and land use, and I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent, is if you don't have a decent environment, you don't have an economy down here. But in terms of the wastewater committee having more powers,
we'll probably stick with the advisory.
Yeah.
Well, we're
Give
moving
Bob
into,
some time to think.
you know, some serious stuff now, right? And
yeah,
towns taking on all sorts of financial responsibilities.
Right.
And I'm not arguing that it's just go through here. There's a finance committee. There's administration in place.
Well, I mean, this is a key committee, but we don't want to get involved in a discussion with the selectmen about their authority and all this stuff. We just want to have everything come through us, right? And then go out to the appropriate people, not around the committee, but at the end of the day, we're here to make advice to the selectmen. That's kind of my role too, you know. So, but that in no way diminishes, you know, the critical nature of everything we're doing. I mean, this is a key committee in town.
Yeah, even going back to DHY, it was such a power struggle that you talk about advisory versus anything else. The selectmen are still the sewer commissioners, so they didn't want to let go of that for anybody else to take it on. So I would think as long as that stays that way, it's not going to be easy to make this thing run without the selectmen there all the time. But you know, the other thing is when Bob was speaking, he said if, you know, about getting time to do all these things. It's not an if, it's a must. I think as the administration, you need to segregate time out of everybody's schedules and say, this is how much time you need to commit without interruption. I know it's not easy, but you know, there needs to be some commitment to get some of these tasks done. As you say, you know, August of 22 is coming fast. If you have any prayer of being ready for it, let's give you what, 6 months to complete well, I won't say everything, but like land use regulations and your flows and things like that. I think they need to be identified pretty quickly.
And the scheduling point, you know, there are public meetings within the context of a very basic schedule like that are, you know, on various topics. So RAC as sort of the conduit to sort of take some of that public input and then provide recommendations, I think is an important role in this process. And as I said, it's as much, you know, policy and getting input, and environment is a major point of this, emphasizing that point on the RAC website, but providing all the points in what I would refer to as sort of the, you know, administrative deliverable page. So we get all the message out there that when somebody asks, what's a building going to look like when we do this? Well, here it is. You know, what's the financing plan? There it is. And then so all those things represent more of technical documents. The wastewater committee is still that sort of public entity in a role in helping with some of the policy guidance. So these are boxes to which we put deliverables. And if you, you know, if you look back, it becomes something where you're telling people, you know, look at that, it's 1980 and it was this. We're hoping to do a study that says, here's all the milestones of all the different cost estimates over the years, and here's the progression of those, you know, over those years. So in 1980 was 9, another milestone was how many years later, which there was a study done and it was this and that. So where do you think it's going to go? And so I think it's important to encapsulate these technical documents into more understandable sort of progression or chronology documents. And people are familiar with this, you know, and these are messages we want to deliver on some of the pages is our lawsuits in our future, you know, and there's some evidence to that effect. forgetting what, yeah, and wastewater isn't new. These are some of the things that, you know, it goes back to Roma times. So these are some of the things we want to move forward with to say, there's a technical documents, but within that, here's a sort of a view of the sort of chronology of those documents. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Just to put a thought out there, whether it's a good one or not, on this template, if you will, does it help or hurt to show existing town departments in relationship to the various tasks? For example, pick up local economic land use, planning board, to, if you will, share the idea of exactly which town departments are going to interface with which areas of responsibility that are on that chart: environmental health, Board of Health, etc. Just picking a couple.
But you're right, and that's what we're building now. We've had 2 meetings with staff, and now I have to build each box and talk about the deliverables with staff, and then who's going to be responsible for what. And then if you were to go on that page, you might have a document that describes this is an economic strategy. You want to contact this person to learn more about it. So what it does is it divides up the yes, Kathy and Kyle over there saying which one of us will. But
which thanks for being there.
Yes. And what it does is it means that it's not just on one department's back. It's you're going straight to the target that's creating the deliverable. So that's a good point. And in each of these pages, there might be contacts as it relates to that deliverable. If you want to learn more about land use, here's the email address. And local regulations, household and business, and all that. So it's a good way for people to talk directly to each department head responsible for that, because the engineering project management is enough, you know, for one team. Everything else has to be spread out over all the deliverables.
Jeff, I have a question. Who is on your team now?
It's pretty much every department that would be. So there's going to be everybody in community development. There's going to be everybody on Jeff's team. There's going to be people in finance. And then I'll be talking to the health department about involving them. Community development involves conservation, so they'll be part of the environmental team. We might get people from the Bass River or other organizations that contribute sort of documents and knowledge to the environmental team. So as the first step in this is a literature search, getting every conceivable document into folders. Kyle has facilitated that, and then cross-referencing it to, you know, create the team. The team is really about who's going to produce the deliverables also at the end. So it's community development, DPW, finance, and also outside organizations where there are documents that are contributory to this. It's less of a political or policy thing, those boxes at the bottom.
Anybody else? You know, I think another part of this, and maybe it's just rehashing old information, is asking people, and I don't know how you identify these people, but if we had better broadband, if we had wastewater, what would you do? What could you do? So that we're designing to what somebody will actually use instead of what we think they might do. And I don't know if that's probably not an easy task, but whether you talk to existing property owners or potential developers that we know might be looking into doing something here, I think it'd be a good idea to see if that we can get any input from them on the design and everything. So you know where your flow rates are, where you want them and whatnot. Okay, so that takes care of structure, right?
3 and 4, I think, pretty much. Yeah.
Reclaim water discussion.
Thank you, everyone.
David, you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I can provide another quick little update to the group. So Carl had reached out to Dave and I asking about the reclaimed water relating back to Mr. McNall's public comment at the start of the meeting today, and asked what it would take and what that involves. So I believe where the question is stemming from is how can we get reclaimed water back to individual users from the new facility? So what that would require would be piping and pumping to individual homes or properties in order to use that water, along with advanced treatment above and beyond what's currently planned at the facility. So that treatment would need to be Class A reclaimed water standard. So that's lower solids and higher disinfection. So it's an advanced treatment, again, beyond what's currently included in the project. So if the committee was interested, we could develop a cost estimate for the piping, which would just be a ballpark estimate for the piping and advanced treatment that would be required.
I think part of Dave's comment also was would be very costly at this point to coordinate with the existing project.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it's less common in this area. You mentioned the project down in Austin. It would be tricky also for the town to determine, who would be then using the water, how would you monitor and meter that water, and who would pay for that additional infrastructure. It's a whole separate set of infrastructure.
Yeah, I think he made a good comment about so when your demand and your supply doesn't match, where do you store it? Type of things also, which is a whole nother headache. So.
Right.
Well, if I could, Mr. Chair, as the committee I'm sure is aware, we have reclaimed water that we're using at Bayberry Hills, and we're the only community in Massachusetts that provides that directly for irrigation purposes. And we have permission to do it for all of Bayberry Hills Golf Course. It's primarily focused on the links at this point because of a distribution challenge with the piping, but they have used some of it this year on other holes at the golf course as well. So we're looking to expand that. And I'd suggest that one of our goals is to maximize the use of that as a resource, because it certainly is very productive for them. And in discussions about wastewater generally, I've been trying to keep Scott Gilmore in the loop and informed as to what's going on. And he's very concerned about losing that resource. He wants to see that continue. So we'll have further discussions with the committee kind of about what that looks like as we build a wastewater treatment plant. But the point I want to make is that at this point, we have about 30 million gallons a year of treated effluent from the septic facility, and about 10 million gallons is being used at the golf course, and that was a banner year. So we're not even maximizing the use of that. And to the point that was made before about advanced treatment, the septic facility has that advanced disinfection on that resource, if you will. So that there is opportunity there without adding additional cost and technology to the treatment facility at 99 Buck Island Road that already exists at the septic facility. So this is a complex discussion, but it, I think, does impact what a resource that we have available to us at the septic facility. So my recommendation would be to continue to maximize the use of that resource at the septic facility and not necessarily add the cost associated with the treatment for the treatment facility at this time. Certainly something we could leave the door open for in the future, but where we have a resource where, it's approaching 20 million gallons of effluent that we're not able to provide a beneficial use for at this point, I'd suggest we continue to explore that versus adding additional capacity.
And to add on to Jeff's comments too, you folks are probably familiar with the evaluation of Bass River Golf Course, potential reuse down the future as well. So again, leaving the door open for that opportunity under this facility as well is important.
John?
Just one thought comes to mind here is that we're looking at a project that's going to go 30 or 40 years. And at the outset, I think we've been talking about maybe reaching around 60% of the homes in the town. And I just think that the thought is we can make this so expensive that it becomes unbuildable. And from a cost benefit ratio, if we were to get further thought about recycling the reclaimed water to large numbers of properties, we'd have to offset that with the value of reaching out to more properties initially to bring them into the system. There may be more environmental benefit by reaching out to more properties than, if you will, recycling water to a lesser number of properties.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to get us, you know, as complete an answer on the question so that we can pretty much put it to bed and say, sorry, it's not feasible right now. As much as I agree with Tom to a certain degree, I'd like to see it, but you know, sounds like the logistics of making it work are just too much.
Well, certainly for phase one, you know, we need to make sure that we can get phase one in the ground. Future phases, you know, may involve issues associated with groundwater recharge and having the appropriate facilities for that, which could add additional costs that could all of a sudden make a reclaim discussion, you know, more relevant and you know, make the cost of that. But where we're starting off, I honestly think we've got to find some success, and with the costs rising as rapidly as they are, and the availability of water so prevalent as opposed to, you know, areas that are in the desert, it just makes it so that you know, the perceived value, we're having a hard enough problem trying to convince the local residents that this project alone is a very high value. When, you know, you start adding additional elements and cost to it while they provide certain benefits, you know, it almost makes it so, you know, are you going to buy a Chevy or are you going to buy, you know, a Lamborghini kind of a thing?
Right. We have time in the process where this is going to come up again, right? At the moment, we know where the discharge for the plant is going. It's very conveniently located next door. There's enough capacity there for the first couple of phases of the sewering project as a whole. Conveniently located next to the treatment plant that exists today is the golf course, which is accepting the discharge. So we're blessed with these two coincidences at the moment. In the future, when we need additional discharge areas, and we need to pipe from Buck Island Road to Bass River Golf Course, for example, 15, 20, 25 years from now, we should be able to pick up the conversation at that point and say, well, what spars off of that line to which users or uses at that point. So it's not a one and done conversation. Mm-hmm. We're going to be revisiting this every time there's a new phase of development and we need to find new discharge.
Yeah, because even, again, we talk about Bass Road, maybe Blue Rock could use some water for irrigating the course. You know, who knows, but it's a possibility, I guess.
Yeah, I just don't think we should be traveling too far down this road because a lot of people's minds are saying, we're going to build two pipes, one taking my stuff away and another bringing back my sprinkler system water. You know, no, we're not. That's right. We need to get to the point on the first few phases and get this project moving.
Okay, 3 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I brought this up educational purposes. It's to me, just talking about wastewater is a success to the town administrator. I mean, we've been trying 50 years now to do something right for the right reasons. As I look at this young gentleman with a great first name, for your reasons, which are number one, right? It's health, true, right? And it's health for not just us, but for your grandkids and the grandkids after that, right? So just to have people thinking about it, and as Spiro says, maybe 20 years down the road, we do something. I mean, that's all the intent was for. I wasn't hoping to have great success and we're going to do it because I understand it costs money, right? But having no water is a bigger cost, right? And now environment, people come here for the water, right? So it all works together. And we've been waiting so long to have a treatment plant. So I agree with all of you. Let's get it in the ground and move from there. My education was to think about it, make provision for it. I'm happy, extremely happy we're using it at Bayberry. I don't know why it's not being used at the new DPW facility. It could have been, piping, okay, but look what you say, right? We have a lot way to go to conserve our water. A lot of our people, our residents, we love them to death. They don't treat water as precious as it should be. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we've taken care of that. Friends of Bass River has nothing to say this month. We have one set of minutes from September.
Thank you.
Anybody read them? Care to make a motion?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments or corrections? Okay.
Roll call.
Roll call on this one. So George?
Aye.
Tom Roach?
Aye.
Tom Durkin?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Spiro?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Lee?
Aye.
Myself, aye. We got that done. Future meeting dates and agenda items. Has anybody worked on that yet?
No.
Okay. Have we, I know there was a comment about getting back on our regular schedule. We want to try and aim for that next month, maybe?
Sure. Yeah. What
Okay.
do we usually do first Monday of the month, was it, or second Monday? What was
I think that's what.
remind me of what the regular meeting schedule was.
Yeah, maybe we could just double check what Dennis's is, so Dave could be here on.
Yeah.
Well, let's just decide when the next one is.
I'm trying to find that email.
But we're not meeting again in December, correct? Correct. All right. So we're not talking
Tonight
about
is Dennis,
Christmas
so whatever it's not.
You want to get together on the 28th? The fun? When's the
Well,
party?
we need to meet that at your house. Nobody told you? I don't know if we need to meet that soon, but
The first.
this is
13th is second Monday.
right. I don't think that's our
we
normal
usually typically met on the
first Monday, right? But with Christmas, will we have anything to get?
Well,
get
it's
done?
practical matter. We were meeting purposefully on a Monday prior to a selectmen's meeting.
Yeah.
In case there needed to be some business conducted for the selectmen's meeting. Do you want to keep it to the Mondays before the selectmen's meeting?
They move their schedule, but sure. I mean, all right. What
they meet on the not every Tuesday, right?
Almost
twice a month.
Which Mondays? Second, fourth, right?
It depends on
kind of ad
holidays.
hoc as needed.
Yeah, it depends on holidays and things that moves them around a little. That's the problem. We're trying to keep up with them.
January is hard. They meet on the 4th, and then they have a housing summit on the 11th, and then they're not meeting on the 17th.
What's a holiday? I mean, so we could try, sorry to interrupt, but we could try for January 3rd, which would be the first Monday, but as Kurt said, I'm not sure there's really much to discuss. Probably couldn't do the second Monday because I think that interrupts with Dennis. So we'd probably be looking at January 17th. It's freaking holiday.
Yeah, it's a holiday.
So then we'd be looking at January 24th.
why don't we do a tentative January 24th, and if something needs to be done sooner than that, we'll figure it out. 4:30. Does anybody care? Stay with 4:30.
Do you prefer 4? Then we can do it.
I don't care. I thought we were doing it 4 previously.
Probably. I get my meeting.
All right. 124 at 4. Unless, and we'll again leave it open if we need to change it. Anybody have anything else?
Just, Mr. Chairman, I will send out the presentation that I gave through Kyle in a PDF. And I think on your next agenda, you might want to talk about your current website and what changes you might want to make to sort of extricate some of the DHY and do the shift to the Y.
So maybe be prepared to look at the webs.
Your own website.
I think we can discuss it on January 24th. You're right.
Yeah.
Not much is going to happen between now and then, but I think our most beneficial service to the community would be to be available to them on a regular basis. So
Right.
we need a regular schedule, and we need to make meetings available to them as much as possible. I tune into the selectmen's meeting after the fact because I can't watch it live usually. I'm not sure anybody's tuning into these meetings afterwards, but if they know it's the second,
I don't know. But
it's the second and fourth Monday afternoon, it can either be here, tune in, or get the broadcast schedule from us where they can find the video. I guess
I'm going to put this meeting video on YouTube. I've been recording it. I don't know if we've been doing that for every single one, And frankly, our viewership is not the greatest, but that's not the point. We should be transparent and should give them the option.
But as they
So we
say,
can't sell ads.
nothing's happened until we just committed, what's the number? $50 million somewhere? We just committed $50 million. They're going to start tuning in after that.
Yeah, point taken.
All right, so one last thing before we adjourn is to thank Tom Barron for his service to us. He's recently resigned from all his committees.
Is his health all right?
No, unfortunately. I don't know details, but he resigned for health reasons. So I just want to thank him for that.
He's being appreciated throughout the Board of Selectmen meeting. For sure.
Right. Now I'll take the motion to adjourn unless somebody else has anything to say. So, right, a second. All right, same deal. Roll call, George.
Aye.
Tom Roach.
Aye.
Harry.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Spiro.
Aye.
Tom Durkin.
Aye.
John. Aye. Myself, aye. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bill.
Well, thank you. Thanks.